Thank you so much for tuning in to the Defending Christianity podcast. I'm your host, Levi Dade, and in this podcast, we aim to talk about the evidence and reasons for why the Christian faith is true and why it is good. We do this with the hope to encourage the church to engage the culture around us and to be ready to give an answer for the hope that we have in Christ Jesus, as 1 Peter 3:15 commands. Thank you so much for listening. God bless. Welcome back to the Defending Christianity podcast. I'm your host, Levi Dade. Again, with the direction that our culture is going, it's no surprise that students who are raised in the Christian home for most or all of their lives are now leaving the faith once they go to college. And it's even less surprising when you factor in that the church is not equipping our young people as they should with the answers that they need to be intellectually secure in their faith. They've been told their whole lives that the Bible is true because the Bible says it is. Well, what happens when they meet a professor who says, well, the New Testament was put together by Constantine from a list of choices that he had, and he actually chose the ones that he wanted and left out the ones he didn't? Well, how are they going to answer that? Who will your children listen to after a while? They're only with you for 3 months and at school for 9 months out of the year. So what's going to happen after a while when they don't have the answers that they need to be intellectually grounded, because their church hasn't given them that they haven't equipped them with that. They've just told them to have faith, that they shouldn't ask questions, which is very ridiculous to tell a student when you think about how Jesus responded to that. The responsibility to equip our children is not just for the teachers or for the intellectually elite. It's for the church. It's for the parents, first and foremost. And so today, that's going to be what we're talking about, engaging the minds of our students, how to do that. So parents, pastors, youth pastors, Sunday school teachers, and anyone who has an influence over students in the church, listen up, because this one is for you. Our guest today is Tim Barnett. You may know him as Mr. B. He works as a speaker for Stand to Reason, also known as STR, since 2015. Using easy to follow, visually engaging presentations, Tim trains Christians to think clearly about what they believe and why they believe it. His passion and energy will help motivate you and your group to love God with all of your mind. He earned a Bachelor of Science in Physics from York University, a Bachelor of Education from the University of Ontario Institute of Technology, and a Master of Arts in Philosophy from Southern Evangelical Seminary. As some of you may recall, we had the president of Stand to Reason, Greg Kuckel, on the show last year, and it's great to have another STR representative like Tim on the show. Tim, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on the show.
So can you talk a little bit about just your background, how you were engaged or introduced to apologetics, and what you're doing in terms of ministry right now?
Yeah, sure. I found apologetics, I tell people, a little late in life. I'm always jealous when I see, these 10, 11-year-olds who are, familiar with arguments for why they believe what they believe, because I was into my early 20s by the time I discovered what apologetics is. So I was raised in the church, grew up going to a small country church, and I tell people, I was related to half the congregation, that kind of thing. And I was taught, Bible stories. We did the youth group, we did Sunday school, we did all that stuff, went to the Bible camps and everything else. But it wasn't until I was in university where my faith, I was, as you just read in the bio there, I was studying physics at a secular university here in the Toronto area. And I had friends who were atheists and Muslim and Jewish. Toronto is a very diverse area, and they began to ask me questions about my faith. They knew I went to church and on Sundays, and so they were curious about what I thought about different things, creation, evolution, for example. Many, especially my atheist friends, were curious how I went to church on Sunday, but yet I was studying physics and science. So how do those things come together? And to be honest, I had no good answers. In fact, when they asked me, why are you a Christian? My response was, because my parents are Christians. And how husbands get this, because we often say things and we wish we could take the words back immediately after we've said something. And that happens in marriage. Well, it happened in this situation too. And man, did I wish that I could take those words back, because frankly, it was embarrassing. Really, I believe because my parents believe I'm supposed to be this, scientific thinker. I'm supposed to be independent. And so I went home, kind of a little bit like with my tail between my legs, and a little ashamed, and started looking into some of the questions they were asking me. So it's funny, the questions didn't come from within, at least initially for me. They came from without. They came from the outside. And I found myself wondering, yeah, is this even true? Maybe, it's not. Maybe something else is true. And fortunately for me, I found some really intelligent Christians who were answering these questions. I also found atheists. I also found guys like Richard Dawkins and others who were, giving a different worldview perspective, different answers. But I was persuaded by the answers that I was finding. Now, that's not to say I didn't change my view on some things. Okay. There was some things that I was taught as a kid, and through, just looking for the answers myself, I changed my mind. Okay. But when it came to like the big questions of Christianity, like, does God exist? Who is Jesus? What about the resurrection? I found that the answers that Christianity had to offer were pretty compelling. So that's kind of my story about how I got here. And then as you and I were talking before the show here, I wanted to use it. I wanted to tell other people, it's interesting that I grew up in the church, in the Christian culture, and didn't know anything about apologetics. I didn't know who some of the big names were. I didn't know who like Josh McDowell was. I didn't know who Lee Strobel was. I didn't know who these best-selling apologists were. And I wanted to change that landscape. And so I just started speaking. That was, I think, a gift. I think we all have gifts that God's given us. And one of the gifts he's given me, I think, is to teach. And as I was growing in that skill and ability, I was offering, for free to go speak at churches. Anyone who would, listen, kind of thing. And it started with 5 people, in a broom closet of a church. And it grew to the point where, I've had the opportunity to speak to thousands of people in stadiums, and then of course doing online ministry as well. So God's been good, and when we're faithful with what he's given us, he provides more opportunity, and that's been my experience.
Amen. Thanks for sharing. You mentioned your online experience, your online ministry, and I want to talk about that for a minute.
Sure.
Most people might recognize you as Red Pen Logic with Mr. B. So can you talk a little bit about, for people who might not even know you at all, let alone Red Pen Logic, what that is and what you do?
Sure. Yeah, people need to know about Red Pen Logic. It's interesting how God uses even suffering and circumstances that we wouldn't wish on anyone, and yet he is able to use those things for some good purpose. And I found that to be true during the pandemic. So when the pandemic happened, 2020, March of 2020, I just got home from speaking at an apologetics conference, and essentially they closed the border like the next day. So I'm here in Canada, and much of my work has to do with going across the border and speaking at churches. And when they closed the border and then eventually like shut everything down to the point where we couldn't even meet in churches, you couldn't have more than 5 people in your home. I mean, it was just crazy even to think back on this. And so how does a guy who speaks for a living, and that's his ministry, how does he do ministry? And I started brainstorming some ideas with Stand to Reason. And one of the things I was doing for fun in my living room was had this idea where I would take a red pen and apply it, because I used to be a full-time high school teacher. So I worked three years in the private school system, and then I did about 3 years in the public school system. And one of the things that a teacher does is they take a red pen and they correct their students' work. Okay. Now the point is to correct because we care. Okay. It's not because we're trying to put the kids down. It's because we're trying, it's supposed to be a learning tool. And so I thought, man, it would be really cool if someone red pen like the tweets that were out there. And all like, there's a lot of nonsense that gets spread on social media like a virus. Okay. And frankly, some of these memes and tweets are really easy to share, and they sound good maybe at first if you don't think too deeply about them. And some of these tweets have hundreds of thousands of retweets or likes. And I just thought, man, someone needs to respond to some of this stuff. Not just in well, I'm going to tweet back at you, but what if we like took the red pen and we applied it to the tweet and just corrected some of the errors that were in it and the logical fallacies and this kind of thing. And so I did that. I took a screenshot of this person's tweet. I forget which one it was now, Alyssa Milano or someone famous, took their tweet and just, started scribbling on it. And I shared it on social media. And to my surprise, it was shared and, reshared over and over and over again, hundreds of times and hundreds of likes. And I thought, man, this is needed. There's a reason why people like this kind of thing. And I wasn't originally, it was more aggressive. I'll be honest. I've grown through the experience. I am sorry, like my love language is sarcasm. So I have to be very careful. So I toned it down a little bit. I used to put grades on them, like, here's your D-, that kind of thing, and circle it. That probably wasn't the best approach. It wasn't gracious enough. And so we changed up the style a little bit and the tone, and we just went full force on this. Started sharing graphics. We started making videos of how the process goes. And again, overnight, things just took off with Red Pen Logic. In our first day on YouTube, we had over 1,000 subscribers.
Wow.
Within the first month, we had like 10,000 subscribers. When I went I started posting some stuff on TikTok. Within 3 months, we had 100,000 followers. So my point is, it's so needed in our soundbite bumper sticker world that we live in.
Yeah.
It's a mic drop world is what it is. You see, when we teach people how to engage the culture, we talk about someone like putting down the gauntlet, and then the other person picks up the gauntlet, and that's supposed to be like a medieval idea where you have two knights and they would duel when someone picked up the gauntlet. But now we live in not a gauntlet world, but a mic drop world where someone will say something and then drop the mic. And then they just walk away like they won. Okay. So you just say something, you tweet something in 140 characters, and it's like you just won the argument. Well, hold on a second. You've just made a claim. Now it's time to examine the claim. And that's what we do at Red Pen Logic. What I say is we assess bad thinking by using good thinking. And we try to have some fun while we're doing it. We make it playful and fun. And my hamster, our kid's hamster, was in a video on the Trinity. And I think our Morky Poo made a guest appearance. We try to make it fun, and even kids are learning from these videos. So again, there's the teaching, the creativity, and we're just trying to get people to think a little bit more clearly. And if that's all, even if an atheist watched my video, and I get lots of comments from atheists, and sometimes it's like, telling me where to go, which is fine, that's their opinion. But other times I don't agree with you, but I'm grateful for your tone, your approach. And some of them will even say, you got me thinking about this. And that's the goal. That's the stone in the shoe. That is, if I can get you thinking, then I have succeeded with this video. I'm not trying to change everyone's mind with one 3-minute video or one graphic. Sometimes that happens, but most of the time it doesn't. I'm realistic here. But if I can get you to think a little bit differently, or, question something, then mission accomplished.
Yeah, I'm going to leave a link in the description to your Rep and Logic YouTube and social medias, but I kind of want to draw a connection here. So your response was that, it blew up overnight. And it seems like with so many people on Twitter making a lot of harsh claims towards Christianity, Christians, the Bible, etc., it's almost like Christians are almost intimidated or scared to engage with that, right? And so when they see someone like you who does, it's like you're almost like, I don't want to say they're a hero, but someone who is willing to engage with that, a place where they're not. And so they're kind of like, they're instantly drawn to it because someone is finally speaking out for us and answering something that we can't answer ourselves. You probably just gave them a lot of inspiration and hope, and hopefully they see what you're doing and they're applying it to other tweets that they're reading that you might not cover.
Yeah. This is a really good observation. There's a sense in which these videos give you courage. You wouldn't otherwise maybe say anything about this issue. Let's say abortion, for example. You're not going to tweet something or you're not going to post something, but you'll maybe repost or share something that I've said and just tell people, what do you think of this? And that way, I get to be the bad guy instead of you. And I'm fine with that. If they want to go about it in that way, then sure, and I get messages from people privately all the time, thanking me for a video or a graphic or whatever, appreciating what I do. And it allows people to share and maybe get a conversation going that maybe wouldn't have otherwise taken place. So Red Pen Logic is happy to kind of be the middleman in some of those discussions.
Yeah. So anybody, if those who are listening, please check out Red Pen Logic on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, as you mentioned. So with that, we're going to demonstrate for you for a few minutes a little bit about what Tim does with Red Pen Logic. He's just going to respond to a few tweets, as many as we can get to in the next 10 to 15 minutes, and then we will cut it from there. So this one is from, I'm not really sure if I can pronounce this, New York Atheist.
Yeah.
There we go.
New York. Yeah.
The Gospels were anonymously written and didn't start appearing until decades after the events they claimed to describe. They started as oral tales, and there are no original manuscripts. You can't honestly claim to know the quote-unquote Christ character said and what he said. So where would you start with that?
Okay, so whenever I look at a tweet like this, the first thing I want to see is, okay, is there anything of value here? Like, what is true and what isn't? Okay, so I'm assessing. Not every bad tweet is all false. Okay, so maybe there's some truth here. And so let's just kind of go through it. The Gospels were anonymously written. Okay, well, that's true and false. In fact, we did a video about this. It is true that the Gospels don't say, written by Mark or written by Matthew. Okay, like maybe Paul does in one of his letters. He'll say, Paul, an apostle of God, this kind of thing. He starts off by naming himself as the author.
Yeah.
So the Gospels don't do that, but they're not a letter. They're different. They're Gospels, and so they're a different kind of genre than just a simple letter. And so we shouldn't expect that necessarily from a gospel. So how do we get the names Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John? I mean, was that just added to them later on, decades later? And the answer is no. I mean, from what we have in the historical record, which are manuscripts, we don't have it says we have no original manuscripts. The originals are actually called autographs, okay? And the manuscripts are copies. Okay, so we don't have the original autographs, but what we do have is manuscripts that do come later. But every single time we have in various places in geographically, it is always Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Okay, it's not Matthew, Mark, Luke, and Thomas. The four Gospels that are listed as scripture are Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. That is consensus. In fact, when we look at the manuscripts, the gospel according to Matthew is often written at the beginning. And then when we have manuscripts that list more than one gospel and we have the beginning or the end, we often see the next gospel, the gospel according to Luke, or whatever it may be. So it's just fascinating to me that all the evidence we have leads us to believe that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John were the authors of the original gospels. Okay. Yeah. That's where the evidence points. So saying that they're anonymous, while true in the sense that it doesn't say by Matthew in the actual gospel, from what manuscripts we have, we do have an indication according to Matthew. And then when we look at the lists that we have, when say Papias or whoever cites a list of canonical books that were in the canon, the New Testament canon, what we have there are Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And so it's just fascinating to me that someone would make a claim like this. It's a little bit deceptive because it makes it seem like, yeah, they were anonymously written. Well, okay, but we know who wrote them because of the testimony of people close to the authors. Okay, yeah. So they were anonymous, but we know who wrote them. And for some people, that's going to be like, wait a second, then why did you say they're anonymous? Well, that's because this is like playing a bit of a game here. Okay. Now, I also think that there's some other stuff wrong with this tweet. Didn't start appearing until decades after. Well, that's true. Gospels were written later. Some of them were decades later. But then it says they started as oral tales. That is loaded language. That's oral tradition is how all this stuff started back in the first century. That's how people communicated history, was through oral traditions. People pass things down from one person to another. Calling them tales, though, makes it sound like it's just a fairy tale. Why not say they started as oral history? Why not that? Well, because this New York atheist who calls him his hashtag or his @ reason and logic is not using reason and logic. Okay. It was more like oral history, not oral tales. Okay. And then he just jumps to, you can't honestly claim to know what the Christ there's character, because in a tale you have a character, right? So in a tale like Marvel Avengers, you have characters like Iron Man and Spider-Man. And see, he takes Christ, which is Jesus, by the way, as a character. But we know, I mean, this almost sounds like he doesn't believe that Jesus was a historical person. So there's a problem there. I think you can know a lot from oral history. Absolutely. Even Bart Ehrman would agree with that. Okay. Who doesn't accept the Gospels as even reliable, but he would accept that. And so he's got hashtag atheism versus faith. I don't even know what that means. I think he's taking faith to be blind faith there. I think if these were eyewitness testimonies, first as oral history, then actually written down near the end of their lives, because they knew that that was the way they could get their history written in a way that could be passed more authoritatively, then so be it, you know. So I think that's probably a good start with this one. So there's some stuff we can say, yeah, okay. And then other stuff, it's like, well, why'd you call it a tale? Why a character? There's an agenda here. There's a bias towards the Gospels that's maybe unstated, but it's clear from what's written.
Awesome. All right, let's go on to the next one here. Richard Dawkins, how thoughtful of God to arrange matters so that wherever you happen to be born, the local religion always turns out to be the true one.
Okay, Richard, this is good. So what he's referring to is the idea, you know, if you're what you believe is kind of an accident of geography. Okay, so Tim, he was born to a Christian home, so that's why he's a Christian. And if a Muslim was born into a Muslim home, well, that's why he's a Muslim and believes Islam's true. The problem with this thinking is it doesn't really get at what's true, the reasons why people hold something to be true. Could be the case that Tim, born a Christian home, turns out to be a Christian. but the real question is, why be a Christian? Why is Christianity true? What he's describing is what might be called the genetic fallacy. Okay, the genetic fallacy is to discount a belief based on the origin of the belief or the source of the belief. That's the genetic fallacy.
Yeah.
And so we don't want to just write Christianity off and say it can't be true because, well, you were born into a Christian home, and so, was born into a Muslim home, so that's why that's true. No. We want to look at the reasons. And so let's see. Did Jesus rise from the dead? Well, if he did, well, that would be evidence for Christianity over and against a religion that denies the resurrection. So it seems to me this is the genetic fallacy kind of played out.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if Richard Dawkins can see that, or if he's trying to be clever or what. But certainly lots of people, I mean, even Richard Dawkins, I think, was raised into at least a nominally Christian home, is my understanding. I could be wrong about this. And now he's an atheist.
Yeah.
So, and he thinks atheism is true. So people convert from other faiths all the time. Okay. So our argument isn't I was born into it, therefore it's true. It's here's our reasons, therefore it's true. Mm. Those are two different claims. So that's where I go with this one. This is funny. This one might be worth an actual red pen.
We got one or two more depending on time. Let me
turn
down just a little bit here. The Soapbox Atheist tweets, Christians shouldn't talk about objective morality when their God's morality is anything but objective. Sometimes deception, incest, slavery, murder, and the rape of children are wrong, and sometimes they're not. Now, Tim, I think to one extent, I know he's right in that morality is objective, but also based on circumstance, correct?
Yeah,
I know that you gave a video talk on this, so you go ahead.
Yeah, and this is where some people get confused. Just because something is objective doesn't mean that the circumstances aren't in play. Okay. So for example, he says deception. Thou shalt not lie, and that's true. We shouldn't lie, but that's not taking all things in consideration, because there are certainly times where, like Rahab, she lied to save the spies, right? And when she did that, she was commended for it. In fact, her life was spared. So there are times there where deception was actually praised, but it was for a moral good. And oftentimes when you have an equation, a moral equation, there's a lot of things that need to be taken into consideration. Like, am I lying for the sake of lying, just because I want to deceive? Or am I lying to save someone's life, which I actually think is a moral good, saving someone's life. So there's goods in play here, or lesser of two evils, however you want to put it. But I mean, look at incest. Where in the Bible is incest ever commended? Okay. Slavery, there's a whole thing needs to go into that. Murder, when God kills someone, it's not murder. Murder is unjustified killing, but the author and creator of life can take life anytime he wants, anytime. That's my view, at least. And I mean, if we think about it, how come? I mean, a lot of people would be pro-choice. A lot of atheists are pro-choice, not all. There are some atheists who are pro-life, but they'll often use an argument like, "Hey, I get to do whatever I want with my body," as if like you create the being, therefore you get to do what you want with it. And so there, and yet when God creates life, creates all of us and sustains all of us, when he takes life, it's like, no, you can't do that. Huh. You know what I'm saying? Like there's a
yep. So God can't play God, but we can play God. It's kind of what they're pulling. Yep.
That's right. Yeah, God can't play God. Raping children.
I think they're confusing descriptive and prescriptive, Tim.
Well, that would be the next. Yeah, that would be the next point that I would want to make on this one. Is let's be real clear. Just because the Bible describes something doesn't mean it's prescribing something. And this is why there's a meme that's out there, and it's like every reference to incest, rape, murder, slavery, and it has the tabs in there, and it's all these, the Bible's filled with these tabs, and it's like some good book, right? And the reason we call it the good book is not because every detail it records gives you the warm and fuzzies. There's a lot of like R-rated content in the Bible. Someone sent me a question privately, and I want to, just read Genesis, read Joshua and Judges. I mean, there's stuff in there that is like, I wouldn't read to my 6-year-old, okay, before bed, because I don't want to give her nightmares. Okay, there's some stuff in there that's heavy. And but that doesn't mean it's not true. It doesn't mean it's prescribed for everyone. It's just describing what actually happened. And part of what the Bible's doing there is showing us the wickedness of man. Okay. It's showing us the wickedness of man. And here's why God is responding. It's good. It's called the good book is because it has the gospel, the good news. Despite all of our bad, despite all of our sin, God comes. The word became flesh and dwelt among us. Why? Because he's on a rescue mission to seek and to save wicked men and women. Okay. So it's not prescribing us to go out and sleep with, our sisters or something, or brothers. It's not telling us to, it's not prescribing that we go rape children. Okay. So this is a more nuanced kind of, there's a lot going on in this, like in this one tweet that would need to be fully cashed out. But
Tim,
it sounds,
were you going to say something about a message that you received? You were talking about someone private messaged you a question. And I think I cut you off there.
No. The message was just, and this was from an atheist actually, but they were very sweet about it. They were just wondering, how do you read some of these stories to your kid? Like, would you read the whole Bible to your kid? And my quick response, and I wanted to make a video about it, is no, I don't read. There's lots of stuff in there that I don't read to my 6-year-old, because I'm especially before bed or whatever. I'm not going to read about, some like murdering or sacrificing their kids to Moloch or these kinds of things. I mean, we could pick some of the sexual stuff. My 6-year-old doesn't need to know about, Lot's daughters getting him drunk and then having sex with them, or I may, when it comes to David and Goliath, okay, it's a fun story, but I'm not going to tell my 6-year-old about where he takes a sword and chops off Goliath's head and parades it around. You know what I'm saying? So I want to be age appropriate with some of this stuff. And I think I can teach some of the lessons in that without going deep. And then when they reach a certain age, hey, we can talk about these really hard passages, these difficult stories. And go from there. So cool. That's a good one. There's lots in there.
Timmy, you got time for one more?
Sure, let's do one more.
All right, let's do one more. Oh, God, the tweet of God says, I commit 70,000 abortions a day and no one tells me it's a sin.
Yeah.
So this is obviously sarcasm and trying to make a point.
Yeah, the tweet of God. Okay. It goes back to a distinction that we just made a second ago, where God can't be God. And so they end up saying, okay, 70,000 abortions a day. God's the one causing all those abortions. Now, I don't know whether the number's true. I'd have to look into it. Is there 70,000 abortions that happen a day? So the question of fact, no one tells me it's a sin. Well, it's true. God doesn't commit sin. And we just said, God can take a life anytime he wants. But another question is God the one who's causing that life to be taken? Is he literally causing, is the miscarriage God supernaturally causing an abortion? You know what I'm saying? Or is there other things in play going on? So it's fascinating to me that it's just assumed in the tweet that if a miscarriage occurs, that must be God kind of intervening in an abortion of some kind. And I think we make a distinction between elective abortion and miscarriage. Those are two different things. I mean, there's a lot that could be cashed out in this, again, in this one tweet. But I think a big point is when God kills, if God is killing in this situation, that is different than a human killing another human. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
One is called murder and the other is killing. I mean, it's true. But the question is, can God, the creator of the universe, take a life? And I mean, I just don't see why God couldn't do that as the creator. There are certain things God gets to do. Maybe this is a better way to put it. I'm just kind of thinking on my feet here. But there are certain things God gets to do that we don't get to do. And all of a sudden, and people immediately, it's like, oh, double standard or whatever. No, God's a different being. You know, God can do things that we just don't have the prerogative. We don't get to do. He's God.
I mean, and the same is
God.
true with parents and children. Parents can do things that they tell their children not to do. It's not a double standard. It's a completely different position of authority. We can put it that way, and it makes the point clear that God is in a different point of authority than us.
That's right. So when I might get myself into trouble, but if I were to hypothetically spank my daughter, that doesn't mean my kids get to go spank each other or hit each other. You know what I'm saying? There's different things in play here. But if, the kid says, well, you hit my butt, and so I'm going to go hit all. No, that's not how this works.
Yeah.
Daddy and mommy get to do things that you don't get to do. I get to drink. I get to drive. I get to do, not at the same time, but you know what I'm saying? Like there are things that adults get to do that kids don't get to do.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think we understand that when it comes to lots of things, and it also applies to even more so in the case of when we're talking about God versus the creature. So that would be a good start, man. Some of those I should maybe actually get the red pen
and go for it. I Dropboxed you the link to them, so they're all there.
Sweet.
Thank you so much for being on. Thank you so much also for going over the time. I think this is the longest I've ever gone over of an interview. They're usually just an hour. Thank you so much. It means a lot.
Yeah, I'm long-winded, so I don't know if you want to turn it into 2 podcasts or what, but
usually whenever it gets over 40 minutes or even 30 sometimes, I usually split it into 2. Sorry for keeping you so long.
No, it's been fun. I hope that our listeners find that there's a lot of practical takeaways in how you engage the minds of our students. And then even, watching us kind of go back and forth on some of these tweets, we don't need to be intimidated. I mean, some people might read these first time read through and think, wow, how do I even begin? But you this is how the process works. You're literally watching it. It's like making hamburger or something, or making sausage. It's not pretty, but you're kind of just, okay, what's going on here? Line by line. And okay. And what's the most important thing that needs to be said? Because oftentimes in a response where we read pen, you can't say everything. And so what's the main point, or what are the 2 main points that I can make on this graphic that someone could take away? So there you go.
Awesome. Well, there might be some parent or youth pastor or pastor out there who's a little bit intimidated because they haven't engaged with these, they haven't challenged the minds of our students or engaged them. They've been maybe a just have faith person, which if you are and you're listening, no condemnation at all. We love you, and we also want you to know the truth of our faith in that regard as well. So is there any encouragement that you can give to them as we end the show?
Yeah, I would just say if that's the place you're coming from, you're right. We're not condemning you. I know lots of people who have a faith that is very experiential, emotional. They don't think very deeply about some of this other stuff. They don't want to engage in that stuff. Okay, but if you want to engage where our students are currently at, then you need to start jumping in with both feet into this world, not just for your benefit, but for their benefit. We need you to have a relationship with your kids. We're not downplaying that. Relationship is so, so important, but so is knowing the truth and defending it. And so my encouragement would be you don't have to learn everything overnight. I will probably, until my last breath, be learning some new things. Okay. So don't be overwhelmed by that, but just start with today. What am I going to learn today? Maybe I'm going to open up a book and read, 10 pages and learn something. I'm going to go to God's word, check the scriptures, and see if these things like the Bereans are so. And the Bereans were more noble because they did that. So that's what we want to do. And just take it one day at a time, grow, engage your own mind. Because what I find is you can't engage the mind of your student if you don't have your own engaged. So it starts with you, but be encouraged. You can do this. You can do this too. And so that might be a good place to leave off.
Well, everybody, you've heard from Tim Barnett, also known as Mr. B. Thank you again for being on the show, and we hope to have you again soon.
Awesome. Look forward to it.
Thank you so much for joining us today on Defending Christianity podcast. I hope and pray that you were encouraged and strengthened in your faith. And if you're someone who's seeking truth, I hope and pray that you have gotten closer to that, because Jesus is the truth. Join us next time on the Defending Christianity podcast. God bless.